Ohio State this past weekend, in my humble opinion, made a statement against a Penn State team. A Penn State team that was ranked this past, Tuesday by the College Football Playoff Committee, a good Penn State team. They took them to the cleaners. And this Ohio State team just has a different feel to me than the team that we saw last year in 2021. I want to get into that. I think Ohio State has a very realistic case to be the most complete team in all of America. Now, here's why. The defense, for one thing, is doing more than just keeping up their end of the bargain. Like last year, it was Ohio State's going to score a lot of points offensively. If the defense can keep from being that squeaky wheel or that flat tire in the Ferrari, they're going to be okay. Now, we saw multiple times against Oregon, against Michigan, the defense was out to lunch. Like they were just getting run over with the power run scheme, with the inside zone, was not a good run defense. And that got taken advantage of multiple times. Last year, let's look at the numbers. 374 yards allowed per game of total offense. Gave up 127 rush yards a game. Gave up close to 4 yards a carry. Not winning football. That speaks to how elite the offense had to be last year. And look at 2022. Jim Knowles has come through and just totally revamped this defense. Say what you want to about the schedule. I don't care who they're playing. These numbers are a whole lot better. Allowing 100 yards less of offense a game. They're top 5 in the country, giving up only 270 yards. They're allowing less than 100 yards on the ground. They're top 5 in the country, I believe. Top 10 in the country. 2.9 yards a carry. That's good for number 7 in the country allowed. This program, this defense, like I said, doing much more than just hanging on tight for dear life while the offense scores points. This defense has now gone from being the nail to the hammer. They are now the aggressor with Jim Knowles as the defensive coordinator. And it feels like, to me, from this past weekend, they now found themselves their signature game record. And you know what I mean when we talk about these Ohio State teams that really make noise in the playoff and play important games in January. Larry Johnson, one of the best defensive line coaches in the entire country, always has one of his guys, whether it's Chase Young, whether it's one of the Bosa brothers. This year they got JT Tuimoloau. Absolutely stepped onto center stage last week, had one of the best statistical performances that I've ever seen from a defensive player, much less a defensive end. Just think for a second, what if this is just his coming out party? What if this is just the beginning for him and he has more under the hood? I'm just telling you, it's the mark of all great Ohio State teams. And if this really is just the tip of the iceberg for him, as a lot of people in Columbus believe it is, Ohio State's going to be dangerous. And the defense is a huge part as to why I think they have a chance to really, really make some noise in that whole college football playoff conversation. They've allowed the offense to eventually find it. Now, what do I mean by that? We've seen it from a couple of different games, whether it was the Penn State game, whether it was the beginning of the Iowa game, even though they scored 26 points in the first half, they were settling for field goals pretty frequently, whether it was the Notre Dame game. The offense took a minute to get into gear. And you know that I've said this before. Ohio State offensively has an extra gear that I don't believe a lot of teams in the country have, maybe outside of Tennessee, Georgia, you can sprinkle in Alabama. The monster gear. The gear that it's like when you play Super Smash Brothers and you get that star power, you're just untouchable. And it's nobody's fault. It's nothing that your defense is doing incorrectly. You just personnel-wise are out-schemed, outmanned, and Ohio State has found their tempo. They found the monster gear. Well, it used to be you got to hit that right from the jump if you're Ohio State in order to be able to win that game convincingly. Not the case anymore. For Ohio State, the defense now can do more than just hold it down until the offense finds it. And they found it last week in a big way, in the fourth quarter, mind you, against Penn State. So obviously, if you're a complete team, you got more than just the defensive side rolling. And we've come to expect Ohio State's offense to be really elite every single year. I think they may even be better this year. And that's saying something. I mean, looking at the numbers right now, they scored 45 points a game last year in 2021. Right now, through 9 weeks into the season, going into week 10, averaging 49 points a game. It's slight, but I'm telling you, the numbers don't lie here. Numbers can kind of tell half the story. Not the case here. You're getting the whole story here. And C.J. Stroud has looked like he's taken that next step from being the quarterback And a good quarterback last year, really good numbers, was elite in distributing the football, but he's taken that step from being the quarterback to now being the guy. And you can tell when he walks on the field, he's the alpha. He's the one that makes this ship go forward, the one that sets the sail up for them, that allows them to move in the right direction as a program, not just the offense, as a program. He is the bell cow for them. And it looks like he's taken a step up from a vocal leader standpoint, which is a big deal. But for him, he just looks so much more comfortable. I think Letterman Rowe actually has a story out from his time when he had his first start against Minnesota. You might have to go dig a little bit to find that. But Spencer Holbrook talked about that first game against Minnesota. He was so nervous. He was so on edge. And he wasn't comfortable. And that's your first start. I mean, you understand that. But that takes some time to really get right in the saddle as the Ohio State quarterback after all of the phenomenal players that have come through there. So for C.J. Stroud, looking at the numbers, last year, he threw for 38 touchdowns during the regular season. He is currently on pace to throw for 40. And that's a big deal, just him being able to stay consistent through the air. His completion percentage is even just a little bit better. The numbers tell some of the story there, but really, C.J. Stroud looks like he's taken the next step to being the guy. And that's saying something for an offense that lost 2 first-round wide receivers. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are absolute savages. Again, they're scoring more points a game right now. That's impressive. I also think it's impressive the versatility of weapons they have. Because Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, like I said, first-round NFL picks. There's no getting around that. How important they are to your program, how important they were to your offense. To the same token, both those dudes stand right around 6 foot. Marvin Harrison Jr., he's 6'4". Now, I am not saying that Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson are somehow playing second fiddle to Marvin Harrison Jr. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is Marvin Harrison's size allows you to potentially call some different kind of things and maybe throw the ball in a different place that you couldn't throw for Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson. Just food for thought. They now have that alpha wide receiver that can really just body up any DB he plays against for the most part. That does a lot for you schematically. That's an ace in the hole for you a lot of the time. I mean, we've seen him in the red zone just be a big target and cash in on that. Talking about most complete, having a big body wide receiver makes you more versatile. Also, Mayan Williams. How about the emergence of him? How about the way that he's added an extra element to this football team with how he has, one, kind of helped share the load with TreVeyon Henderson, who's still one of the best backs in the country when he's healthy, but the sort of thunder kind of feel he's added to that backfield. I'm not saying TreVeyon Henderson isn't a tough runner. I'm just saying Mayan Williams, he majors in that sort of thing. Like he majors in running between the tackles and running tough behind his shoulder pads. In the Notre Dame game, you pretty much turned around, handed it to him, and allowed him to pick up 5 yards, 6 yards, and just run tough and wear down a defense. I think to put it best, they just have so many different flavors now that they can hurt you with offensively. They have so many different kind of weapons. Like they could hurt you through the air with the explosive play last year. They do that this year as well, but now they got the jump ball a little bit more accessible. Now they got the tough running between the tackles. Again, I'm not saying they were bad a year ago. If you left this segment saying, wow, he says Ohio State was bad last year and they're so good this year, that's not at all the point. You missed it. What I'm saying is they now have more ways they can hurt you. And the more punches you have in your arsenal, the more potential you give yourself when your back's against the wall. Because it may take that kind of an effort against Michigan. It may take the defense being able to have a stop on 4th down in the red zone. That might be how you have to win the game. I don't think they could have done that last year. They may need to put the game on ice in a 4-minute drill and hand the ball to Mayan Williams and then hand the ball to TreVeyon Henderson. They may need that. I don't think they could have done that last year. You see where I'm going with this? The versatility makes them so dangerous. Now, the final thing that makes them the most complete team to me doesn't really show up as much in the stat sheet. Maybe run defense a little bit if you want to get nitpicky, but I think it's more than that. This Ohio State football team has an edge. Maybe some of that comes from what happened against Michigan last year and losing in the fashion they did. Maybe it's all the external stuff that's been talked about with this program. How tough is Ohio State? Can they go 4 quarters with a physical football team? Yeah, they're talented, but are they tough? Ryan Day alluded to just as much in his press conference against Notre Dame. He feels like this is a tough football team, and I do too. I feel like they have a physical edge. I mean, JT Tuimoloau, the edge that he brings to this program, Harrison on the defensive line, Williams. I mean, they got so many guys up there that just add to the edge. And it's not just the defensive line. Like we said, Mayan Williams, a guy that runs the rock effectively for them, and he runs with an attitude. The attitude of this team is a team that is looking to prove themselves. Not so much internally, but I think externally. Because a lot of people, like I said, talked about how tough they were, their mindset, their mentality. They're looking to silence a lot of people. And I think thus far, they've done nothing to disprove that this Ohio State team is substantially tougher than they were a year ago. Maybe some of that's Jim Knowles. Maybe some of that's Ryan Day and his offseason program. Maybe some of it's strength conditioning. I think it starts with an internal switch that has been flipped within that locker room, and it's evident on the field. So for my money, is Ohio State the most complete team in the country? To this point, I'd have a hard time disagreeing with you. Just the fact of the matter. So Ohio State, they're a team that I am very, very excited to see if they do get to that Michigan game undefeated, and it's in Columbus. Would imagine that place will be a zoo. Would imagine there is more likely than not a playoff spot on the line, because it's not a layup that the loser of that game still gets in. So excited to see what Ohio State does the rest of the way. But for our money, they are the most complete team in the country. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.